Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. Well, the Central Board of Secondary Education did away with the Continuous and Comprehensive Evaluation or CCE scheme, which was implemented in 2009 and has restored the Class 10 board examinations that will come into effect from the upcoming academic year of 2017-18. Now, the board is introducing a uniform system for assessment, examination and report card for classes 6 to 9 in order to prepare them for Class 10 board examinations that will be followed by all the schools that are affiliated to the CBSE. The new uniform system will be implemented keeping in mind the provisions of the Right to Education Act of 2009. The syllabus for classes 6 to 9 will now be designed on term assessment basis with a gradual increase in the learning of the students. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze how this move will impact the students. Joining me on the program today are Lata, Vaidynathan, Director, TERI Prakriti School; Anita, Rampal, Professor, Department of Education, Delhi University; Urmi, Goswami, Assistant Editor of the Economic Times; and Mridula, Mukherjee, historian. Well, of course, I'd like to start my debate with Lata Vaidynathan today. Lata Vaidynathan, as far as this particular circular of the CBSE is concerned, how is it going to change the lives of the students? What's going to be different now?
Thank you. Frankly speaking, I'm looking at this circular with mixed feelings. First of all, I'm wondering whether we are going forward or we're taking learning forward. The whole system looks to be very uniform. There's hardly any scope in the system which allows the child's mind and the teacher's mind to meander. Well, while we do not blame systems for any change, I only have this to say that the good news is that across the country, all schools will have a uniform pattern, all school report cards will look the same, all forms of assessments will follow the same directives. Therefore, there is a said uniformity. But I wonder whether we can be blamed, as we used to say, cookie cutters. But I still feel that any scope of great learning process, scope for any innovation, scope for interdisciplinary learning, all seems to have gone away, including the scope which has been provided for as subject enrichment activities. It's a little bothersome since world over things are changing in terms of doing topic-based learning, theme-based learning. Are we heading in the right direction is a question sometimes that bothers my mind.
Indeed.
However, being a die-hard optimist, I'm of the opinion that I will find creative solutions within the scheme. But there are issues which relate to co-scholastic achievements. There are issues which relate to practical work. There are issues which are limited. For example, where sourcing, resourcing, searching, researching, there's so much scope in subjects like social science, science and languages, whether it will all be limited because of a set pattern. My worries are, while on one hand, we are looking at tinkering labs, grants by the Niti Aayog, scope for great innovations, what is happening to this very uniform structure of an assessment-driven learning pattern?
Sure, fair enough. Professor Mukherjee, uniformity aside, of course, uniformity is going to be there now with this new scheme. But what happens to, an individual teacher who brings something special, to the children and brings something special to the table? There's no scope really for that kind of learning.
What I'll say is that the scope will decrease. Even otherwise, I think one of the banes of our education system, as we all know who've been in this profession, is the lack of space for imaginative teaching and imaginative learning, where both the teacher and the student have ample scope to experiment, and it cannot be one size fits all. In fact, progressive ideas in education do not even like the idea of clubbing children of the same age together. There's no particular virtue in it because different learning abilities may be there and different learning interests may be there. So instead of widening our horizons and bringing in more innovation into our education system, I'm very sorry, we seem to be going backward. We seem to be going forward with the abolition of the 10th class exam, but from then onwards I think we are going backwards We just don't seem to have enough confidence in our teachers, in our schools, in our children. We don't seem to also want to give our children a very good childhood.
Exactly.
It seems to me that more and more it has to be regimented, exam oriented, standardized. I mean, why do we want to make, you know, like Lata Vaidynathan said, you know, why would you make these cookie cutter kind of patterns and produce identical morons? I'm sorry. So where is all this talk of becoming the research hub and the innovation hub of the world and whatnot? Are you going to do it with children who've always been put into identical patterns, never encouraged to be different? And now you start from class 6. You know, what are they at that stage? They're 11. You know, so a very early age, you're going to just stop any scope for experimentation. I, for one, was very happy when class 10 board exams were abolished, because it postpones torture by another 2 years. At least children can continue to, you know, where there is scope in schools, where there are good teachers, at least they can, you know, do good things with the children till class 11, and that only 1 year of torture. Now you've reintroduced 10 and now you want to take it down to 6. I mean, in the same newspaper today there was a report that latest experiments show that the later children go to kindergarten, the better it is for them. Some of the best schooling systems like in Finland, they actually go to school at the age of 8.
Yeah.
In most of northwestern Europe, they don't start before 6 or 7. You know, and why are we going backwards?
Indeed, indeed, fair enough. That's a valid point that you're making, of course, and some strong words used as well. Urmi Goswami, torture is what she said the students have to really go through. Are you of the same opinion now, that students will have to go through a torturous childhood from the class of 6?
So I want to dissect the issue at a different level. One is CBSE introducing this circular, putting out the circular saying assessment exams, actually putting out yearly and half yearly and very regimented exams from class 6 onwards, and the idea of assessments, of outcome assessments, and this whole thing about freedom of teaching and learning. Now, one of the problems I think we always face in discussions like this is that we tend to talk about schools looking back at our own schooling, which if you do a quick dipstick, you'll realize is very privileged schooling. And so you now have to look at it in terms of the larger mass of schools. That's all the government schools in backward areas, in not so backward areas, less privilege, the kind of teaching that happens there. So you have to consider that. Now, so there are all these sort of you know, nuances to that question. So the first issue, does having half yearly and yearly examination for kids from class 6 make sense? No, it doesn't make sense. Do I think of it as torture? I really won't go so far, because some form of assessment has to happen. They're not talking about centralized exams, they're talking in terms of centralized what do you call, codification of the results, or what, some format. So we haven't got to a board standard at class 6, but nonetheless I don't think it's such a great idea.
But exams any which ways are happening on a yearly basis.
Yes, they do happen.
Go through
Exactly.
these exams.
They do
so
happen.
the only thing that's different now is that it's going to be centralized and someone can actually pull up these figures at some point.
So you have a format which is common.
Sure.
Now, my problem with this whole half yearly and yearly thing is that very often for a large swathe of schools, it masquerades inefficiencies by the teachers. When teachers do not end up actually catering to the learning needs of the kids, they cover it up with this kind of exam. So you have to complete a syllabus by half year so that you can finish, you can appear for the exam. It doesn't matter what you have learned. Given that in the budget speech, the finance minister spoke about, you know, getting this whole learning outcome concept in, my question then is the CBSE, does it have the wherewithal to actually make those assessments? It doesn't. And is this the way to make the assessments? You have to define what children of a certain age at a certain class should be able to, know by the end of, say, age X. Factor in for the fact that they come from different backgrounds. We are talking about a huge country with different socio-economic sort of realities, and then find assessments to see how far they match up to what is the ideal. Is this the way? My answer is simply a no. This is not the way. So what are you gaining out of this? According to the CBSE, it is to help kids migrate, if they do migrate in between classes 6 and 8, that's one. and 2 is to prepare them, to help them prepare for class 10. Now, that to me is problematic. That means from class 6 onwards, your entire aim of your education system is to prepare them for a board exam. That to me is completely
Today it
ridiculous.
starts with class 10, tomorrow it can go to class 12, day after tomorrow it can go to a PhD. So that's what...
So basically, what you are doing is that you are from age 11, you are taking a child and trying to train them so that they can perform well or are not scared to do the class 10 exam. But that to me is not the be all and end all of an education system. That's one. And as I said, the second part of it is that you're talking about migration. If I'm sorry, I don't have the figures, but from what anecdotal and information one has, it's not a huge percentage of children who are moving around the country.
And after all, you have the same syllabus at the end of the day, so it shouldn't be too problematic. Yeah, I'm going to come to you, Lata Vaidynathan. Just give me one moment. I'm going to get my final guests into the picture as well, and after that you can make your point. You know, as a professor of education yourself, Anita Rampal, you believe that at some point in time we need to really think this through, and we need a major overhaul of our education system itself.
True, and the biggest hurdle is our assessment system, our examination system. For the last some years we have worked on curricula, we worked on teaching pedagogies. In fact, I was leading a team when we were working closely with NCERT on trying to see that at the primary level, we don't need minimum learning levels because they were extremely problematic. They just gave a certain topic and didn't tell you what to do and how it was to be done. So we made learning indicators, which actually showed you for grade 3 and grade 5 in different learning areas that this is the process of learning, and assessment has to be tied to the process. If I don't do observation with you, and if I don't do ways in which you explore things, and if I don't do ways in which you present things yourself, there is nothing by just bringing an exam and saying, here is your test. So we tried to link the two very closely, that you can't do assessment unless it's tied to the process of learning, which ensures that the teacher has actually done this. You've actually worked with your hands. You actually, thought through. So that was the learning indicators, and they were not outcomes. So these are all different terms. Unfortunately, and that is a big question, CBSE got into the act of defining what CCE is, continuous and comprehensive education evaluation. Now this is actually mandated by an act. It's a serious business. It's a legal business. First question is, CBSE shouldn't have got into that. CBSE is a secondary board. It does not deal with elementary education or primary education. NCERT was the body which should really have done that. Why did CBSE get into that? And CBSE got it all wrong. I was on the governing body at one time as the Dean of the Delhi University faculty. We raised this issue, and we even offered that, as a Delhi University system, we can work on this with you, but that didn't take place. They had a very regressive understanding, a very behavioristic understanding, only information-based and memory-based. So you look at any exam that is being conducted, the exams are the same. You just define, or you give information, or you explain. There's nothing which is allowing you to think or explore or discover. So what is the difference? All they're doing is a mechanical exercise of trying to say that you'll have 10% of the content in class 6 and then you'll have 20% of the content. I'm sorry, this is going even further from where we were. What we need is authentic assessment. All over the world, countries have been working on this, which means assessment of performance. How is it you do things, not just what you write or what you memorize. So authentic assessment, which is not assessment of learning, but it is assessment for learning. And these are two very different things. So we need that. And on the one hand, our ministry is taking decisions which are very questionable, that we are going to put in our children into the PISA test, which is the program for international student assessment, done at age 15. We shouldn't have done it earlier, which the ministry did not want, but in 2009, the World Bank had pushed 2 of our states to actually do that. And then there was a lot of chest beating that we did very badly, which is true. If anyone looks at those questions, and we regularly do, because we train, we orient our teachers, just look at the nature of those questions. You can't ask a child to address it unless you taught that way. Sure. Unless that whole thing has happened in the classroom, you can't ask them. But now the ministry is saying we will go in for that assessment again next year. So this whole thing about using assessment as a danda just will not work.
You know, to add to what you're saying.
Before you make a point, let me just go to Lata as well, because she's been wanting to make her point for a while now. Yeah, go ahead, please.
No, Frank, I completely agree with all that has been said so far. But my real worry comes from the fact that exactly as she pointed out, the assessment of learning and assessment for learning, the whole concept is going to be really defeated. Further, I think we'll soon lose track of what is developmental learning. How do we bring about creative thinking? What is the importance of diversified learning within such classroom systems? How are we going to look at inclusivity under such situations? How can these dictations, which will come top down, leave the teacher with totally no scope for her personal thinking, her ability to innovate, creatively ask questions? And I don't know whether it is the old or new system, but I know that even if we trace it back right to our Gurukul, the whole system of inquiry is, I think, going to be defeated. And the whole process of how an educated mind has to respond and react to uncertain, unpredictable situations of the 21st century, where are we skilling these people? All these issues will become absolutely dominant, considering the fact that all that will be left are grade point averages. Now, it's not just this area. If you look at the co-scholastic area, I'm really wondering how just a 3 grade point should be adequate to deal with areas which completely defines the individual in terms of how he or she is going to figure way beyond marks. And the complete definition of certain aspects of education, which says work education, to also include community outreach, art education of differing areas to include performing arts as well as visual arts, and sports. I do not know how such a tangible area can be contained with 3 assessment grades. I think there is a lot more that can be done even within defined scopes of work, where some scope for original thinking, creative thinking, and we are now talking of 21st century skills. Where are we going to look at all that in this whole scheme of things? It's really something that's bothering me. I know we'll have to find creative answers within a certain system, but does this system really leave scope and openings for such creative minds within schools? And I think I agree with Professor Mukherjee. We need to trust our teachers, train them, upgrade their skills, do everything that will bring about learning of good quality that creates an ecosystem also for good learning. Is all that going to go away with paper and pencil tests, where any kind of communication, where any kind of finding the right or wrong answer becomes integral to a system of learning? It really bothers me that there are wide gaps opening up, and it's going to come back to a paper pencil test in terms of uniformity. It's going to be defined in terms of marks, and people are going to be trapped in grades.
Fair enough. You know, you raised a very valid point there about teachers and how we need to trust our teachers. You know, Professor Rampal, as far as our teachers are concerned, I, for one, remember all my teachers, and I know that they did a fantastic job with me. But that's not the same feeling that I get when I speak to fellow parents, you know, who say that the level or the standards of teaching have dropped tremendously. And in an industry where a teacher gets paid far lesser than a call center employee, how do you motivate a teacher really to come out and do her or his job?
Yeah, first, let's not call teaching an industry.
No, I'm sorry I used that word, but yeah, you know what I mean.
I completely go by what you say, and that is our task. I mean, our life has been to work with teachers. But the thing is that teachers are not being taken into confidence, and more the way you make it into a centralized exercise of using children's scores to assess what teachers are doing, and using CCTVs and using, you know, all that, it means the more you distrust a teacher. Whereas when you work with teachers, I can tell you one thing, that in Delhi schools, in certain areas where children had failed in the maths exams, we took volunteer children and we just did a different kind of assessment with them, with the teacher, with a researcher, my own PhD student, and we found that just when the assessment was more meaningful, they were trying to keep track of the entire midday meal in their school, so there's a purpose to it, and they did all the data that is required to do that, you know. So they found how to, they couldn't find an average of 5 numbers, in the exam, so they failed. But when they were doing this complicated data management of the school, they were doing amazing things without any extra teaching. And the teachers also realized that there's a purpose to what they are doing, and that's why they are doing very well when they're failing in. So I think we need to work with teachers in more localized ways, centralized ways of giving them fixed formats and asking them every week that give your mark here and give them. They then just subvert the system. Today in schools, what's happening is, I know, even near Delhi University, the schools, they are just saying, let children write what they want, let them cheat, let them, because assessment has become a danda for them. So why should they invest their motivation into it? I think unless they do it, because actually they are the ones who understand children, who will be working with them, who know them best, who know what's best for them. If we don't get them into...
And they are the ones who are going to make an impression on impressionable minds.
Absolutely. And with Education for All, we have all kinds of children coming from all different backgrounds. For a teacher to understand that, address the teaching learning process, including assessment, with all these different children and their own life worlds, their own knowledge constructions, is a major challenge. Let's support teachers, work with them, and let them understand what assessment is and how best it can make children learn better.
Sure, fair enough. Yeah, Urmi, you wanted to make a point.
Yeah, what I basically wanted to say is that, one of the things you notice what has happened is that teaching has become very textbook bound, and as a result of which, it kind of does not give due credit to the realities of a child's ability. A child coming from an upper middle class home has the kind of resources and the background support to probably take in more. But a child from a poorer background may have the enthusiasm but not have that kind of resources. The teacher needs to adjust how they teach. So it makes more sense actually for teachers to have a sort of a guide, a marker, and which teachers are pretty good at. I mean, even if you want to do it in a centralized way, is that, okay, these are the things that a child should be able to do by the time they're, say, age, say, 10 or 11. But how that is done and at what rate that they learn is something they're best able to judge given the class that they have. And the class changes from year to year, their demands change from year to year. That level, one of the problems with our education system is that teachers don't have that kind of freedom. And I'm sure Dr. Rampal knows much more, having worked with the government system, is that this lack of freedom is much greater actually in the schools where teachers are actually paid much better because they are government employees. They have certain facilities the schools may not have, but the teachers are not badly paid. But the resources for the school are not probably all there, and you need to free those teachers to orient the curriculum or the learning process for the child that comes into that class. I mean, as much as I find this problematic, if all that the CBSE is trying to do, even that should be a question mark, is to say, fine, how you assess the child at the end of the year should be put out in this format. My question then is this format cover the complexity of the child that is and the kind of learning that needs to happen? It seems a little dodgy to me. But I think, when we keep talking about innovative teaching, innovative learning, we always think at the upper end of the spectrum. I think there's much more need to think about, we have to look at the kind of innovations that could and should happen at the lower end of the spectrum.
Sure.
In the more backward areas. That is where you would be surprised at the level of enthusiasm that exists among kids to learn there, far more than you would see in cities.
Indeed, the enthusiasm among the kids is indeed present, but is there still that enthusiasm among the teachers? Is teaching looked at just as a job now, Professor Mukherjee? Is it no longer a passion?
You can't generalize and you can't overgeneralize in this. Of course, we all know the examples of teacher absenteeism, especially where monitoring cannot be easy. Often rural areas, remote areas, teachers don't go. But there have been a number of other solutions that have been suggested and worked at, where local communities, panchayats and all get involved, and parent-teacher communities get involved in actually monitoring that teaching is actually happening. This is not the way to solve that problem, even if it is a problem. On the other hand, I would like to say that the very large number of teachers, including in backward areas and rural areas, they are from the community, they are from the area, and a very large number of them are very motivated and need a proper atmosphere and a proper encouragement to bring out their best, and they do. You know, so it's not as if it's a black and white picture that, you know, all teachers, or it's become a trend. You can say that, you know, compared to a certain time that we imagine happened in the past, I'm sure there were enough bad teachers in our schools as well. So, you know, one mustn't romanticize in that way. And I think what's very important is that that I find it actually very disappointing that when somebody like the CBSE, which is supposed to have such enormous resources and responsibilities, actually starts tinkering with a system, they don't actually tinker with it in a forward-looking direction.
Sure.
I mean, for example, I find, and this is, I'm saying this as a teacher and as a parent, you know, you never find an assessment of where a child has started, let's say at the beginning of that class, and where a child has reached in the middle of that class and the end of that class. Each child is supposed to reach this level. You know, you've all seen those cartoons of an elephant and a deer and a, you know, rabbit and all standing, and the goalpost is the same, and saying this is equal. Now you all run and let's see who reaches there fast. Kids come into school, they come into classes with differing abilities, with different backgrounds, with different levels that they've reached. We never give them credit for the achievement that they have actually done, which is what will actually make them better and come up to that mythical standard that we set.
Indeed.
So we don't do it individually. When I teach in my university, I always will take into account where a person is coming from, what education they've got, what linguistic skills they are lacking, and will try and grade them even in such a manner that encourages them. There's nothing such as an absolute grade, an absolute thing, because what is your objective? Your objective is at the end of those 2 years that student is with you. With us it's, you know, an MA program of 2 years. The student should have learnt a lot, and you use every method possible, including giving a higher grade where it is not necessarily deserved, in order to encourage a student. So, but with this system that we are now putting into place, you know, it's all uniformity, it's all one standard thing, and who knows that this is the right thing at this time that everybody must achieve? I mean, we all know it's wrong.
Indeed.
I don't understand why.
I'm out of time, so I'll tell you what. I'll give you all 15 seconds to give your concluding remarks, starting with you, Urmi, please.
Well,
very quickly.
Very simply put, the CBSE has tried to have a uniform reporting system. Now, I have yet to figure out the value of that. They are trying to link it to outcomes, but they are not. They're not capable of. They don't have the wherewithal to define outcomes or make those assessments of learning indicators or any of those things. So I still can't understand the logic of this exercise, and they need to be much more
Professor
open
Rampal,
about it.
Yes, I think the bodies which understand assessment and assessment for learning should be involved. CBSE should not be really doing this at this stage, especially at the upper primary and the elementary stage. I think all our theories now don't talk of competence, they talk of motivation. So how do you motivate children to learn better is the ultimate aim, and these kind of formats and this kind of standardization, uniformity is not going to help.
Professor Mukherjee, very quick comment, please.
I think it will only lead to more paperwork and more fudging.
All right. And Lata, Vaidynathan, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I had nothing to complain with the common reporting system, but the fact that they have taken away all my happiness and joy from at least up to class 8, which is the developmental area of children in so many ways, and the amount of possibility for both the teachers, students and the whole system to learn together has also become now very uniform. It really bothers me that that kind of freedom that I had is gone.
All right. On that note, I'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. A lively debate. I'd like to continue, but unfortunately, I'm out of time. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much to all my guests as well. That's all the time we have. See you again next time.
Thank you.